Hi, Michelle. Thank you for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. The date is February 16th. Just wanted to go over two things before we got our discussion started. The first is that right now I'm recording this conversation, and after the conversation is complete, I'll be uploading this video to our YouTube channel. Are you fine with us doing that?
Yes, I am.
All right, great. And then the second thing is just in case we have some people who join our conversation today to listen in. Here at Vonvo, we're all about civil and valuable conversations, and we don't want there to be any personal attacks on anyone. Are you fine with those rules?
Yes, I am.
All right, great. So then let's go into our discussion about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And because Sana was, at least as of now, not able to join us, um, you know, first, can you just give any people who watched this discussion a quick background of yourself and how you became so passionate about this subject?
I became passionate about the subject by actually moving back to Israel, where I was born. But I lived in Canada and the United States for most of my life. And 6.5 years ago, I returned to Israel. And I live not far from Gaza. And I moved in 2006. And in 2007, I started studying Hebrew because I hadn't spoken it for so long. And the school teacher, our teacher who was teaching Hebrew, was actually a resident of Sderot, where they were having problems with rocket attacks from Gaza. And I was shocked because I had never heard of it before. I was living in the United States, and I had never heard in the news that there were rocket attacks from Gaza into Sderot. And every time her phone would ring, she would say, "Excuse me, I have to take this call. It might be my daughter's." And then she would hang up, and then she explained to us what was going on. And she was worried because she thought maybe her daughters are going to tell her that there was a attack close by. And I was stunned. Like, how can this be going on? And then we talked to her about it. We were all new immigrants, and we said, and she explained to us that it's been going on since 2001, and we were just shocked to hear this. So something very wrong with the media. How can they not broadcast something like that? Okay, maybe not on a daily basis, but at least do a report on it and let people know that there are rockets being launched. And so I decided to do something about it. Well, I didn't do anything about it immediately, but I did do is I started in 2007. I started arguing about the Israeli and Arab conflict in Yahoo Answers, which is it's a group in Yahoo where you can discuss different topics, and one of them is Israel. And Israel is supposed to be designed for vacation information, but it's turned into a war zone about Israel and the Arab conflict. And so I started joining that, and then slowly I made my way into Facebook, and then there was when there was an earthquake in Haiti, and then people started, Israel sent a group of doctors and they opened a field hospital. I felt very proud, and then I started reporting on what was going on in Haiti, and a few friends of mine, "Why don't you start your own group?" Which I did. And then from that group, I started my weblog, and today I have anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000 readers every day in my weblog, and there's over 7,000 members in the group, and
Right.
it's going very well. And so I've become more active. Now I'm doing this speaking about Israel over the internet.
Right. And so, I mean, just because I think I don't know, I was just curious to ask it because of what you had to say. I mean, is there, when it comes to this conflict, is there a reason why, like the title of the room would be Israeli Palestinian conflict, and I noted that you called it the Israeli Arab conflict. Is there something behind that that you think people don't realize that, you could basically just inform us about, why you can, or at least you're calling it that, and where that exactly comes from that maybe people don't realize. I just took note of it and thought it was a question that I've yet to ask, and why not ask it now?
Absolutely. Let's begin at the beginning. Let's begin with the name Palestine, first of all. Uh, let's begin with history 2,000 years ago. Um, first of all, what we know Israel today was called Judea and Israel also. There were two states, and the Romans came. But let's go back a little further. Prior to that, there was an invasion of the Philistines, who are said to be from the Greek islands. There's a lot of dispute about where they actually come from. But let's just say that they come from the Greek islands, because that is most of the time that's what's agreed upon. And so they came and invaded the southern part, actually where I live, including Gaza and Ashkelon and Ashdod and Gat. And they invaded, and they were called the Philistines. And that was during the story of David and Goliath, the story of Samson and Delilah, are all during the period. Now, when the Romans came and invaded, in order to humiliate Jews, they decided to call Judea, calling it Judat Palestina. And that derives from Philistine. In other words, you're invaded again, is what we're actually trying to say to the Jews who lived here. Now, suddenly we have to skip, and it's been called Palestina for this 2 centuries, but it has nothing to do with Islam or any form of Arab. It has to do with Romans. Then after the Byzantine era, which is Roman, I'm skipping a lot. There were a lot of invasions here: the Babylonians, the Mamluks,
Right.
all kinds of invaders. But I'm just skipping because it's a very long history. And then the Turks, and it was still called the state of Palestine, or Palestine, but it wasn't really a country. It belonged to the the Ottoman Empire. And after the Ottoman Empire, that ended in 1917, it was the British who came here and invaded and called it the British Mandate for Palestine. And the reason they came here was in order to create a Jewish state. And so when I was born here in 1957, and until we left when I was 8 years old in 1966, there was never any reference to the Arabs who live here as being called Palestinian. We had never heard. Actually, they never referred to themselves as Palestinians.
When was this?
Until Yasser Arafat.
Okay.
Until 1966, when we left here, there was never the Arabs never referred to themselves as Palestinians. They just referred themselves as Arab. They, as a matter of fact, if you listen to any news reports prior to 1967 in reference to the Arabs that live here, and in reference to the Israeli-Arab conflict, that's exactly what it's called, Israeli-Arab conflict. In any news report, if you just look for any news report from any newspaper in the world, there was never any mention of a place called, a people called Palestinians. It was always referred to as the Israel-Arab conflict, and the Arabs living here were referred to as Arabs. In 1967, when Yasser Arafat came here, and by the way, he's Egyptian. He was born in Egypt, so he's not really quote unquote Palestinian either. He decided, and he actually mentions this in a quote, that there needs to be, the people who live here need to have an identity, and in order for them to have an identity, he decided to call them Palestinians, and that Palestinians was born in 1967. But since I wasn't here to hear this, I never even knew they were referred to as Palestinians. When I returned, I listened to the news, and even the Israelis call them Palestinians. And I asked people, where did this come from? Who are these Palestinians? And they said, well, the Arabs that live call themselves Palestinians. Well, I don't want to indulge them. It's as simple as that. I don't see any reason why I should change just because they decided to create an identity which they didn't have before, that I should go along with it and just say, yes, these people are Palestinians. There was a country called Palestine, there was never a country called Palestine. It was always a region that was controlled by different empires, the last one being the British. Prior to that, it was the Ottoman. So to suddenly pretend that because a Palestinian people or a Palestinian nation, I absolutely refuse to go along with that, because it's simply not true. And I'm not interested in rewriting history. And people have indulged these people who decided to call themselves as such, but I won't. Even in the Israeli media, they call them Palestinians, but I will continue to call them Arabs. One, because that's what they are, and two, we don't know where Palestine is going to be. So until there is a country called Palestine, for now they're Arabs.
Right. And I mean, do you think that
that's my take on it?
Yeah. And now, do you think that part of, do you think people who well, it's kind of like two questions. One, you bring up history, and there seems to constantly be a bit of a different interpretation that people make of history, and so I wanted to get your opinion on whether or not you think that is part of what causes this conflict and continues to have it keep going on and on, is the different history interpretations people make. And then at the same time, just trying to dig down into where the roots of the conflict come from, then do you think also, the fact that, people such as yourself who will have that interpretation of history and then call Palestinians Arabs, and potentially, I guess, to the other side, feel like they're being degraded because they can't consider themselves that? Do you think that's those two items are part of what has this continue to go on and on?
Possibly, but nobody considered, let's say, my mother, who was born in Egypt and now lives in Israel, was not considered Israeli when she was living in Egypt. She became Israeli when there was a country called Israel, and it was created for Israelis, and now we're Israelis. Prior to that, nobody called themselves Israeli. Well, there's no such country as Palestine, so I don't see why we should call. These people used to call themselves Arabs. So why would I want to call them Palestinians when there's no Palestinian country? It doesn't exist. It's just like it doesn't have borders. It doesn't have anything. So until it does, and when it does, and wherever it is, I will be happy to call them Palestinians. But until then, I think by doing so, by calling them Palestinians, it creates a bigger problem, because people all over the world think that there used to be a country that was called Palestine, like an independent country like Canada or Japan, that Israelis went into that country that was once an independent, stole the land, quote unquote, and then created a country on top of that other country that was called Palestine. This is completely false. But people honestly and truly, with all their, I know they have intentions when they believe this, but it's absolutely false. There was no such place. It was a state. It was a region. Yes, it was called Palestine. It was a region, but it was not a country. So there's nothing to steal. You can't steal something that doesn't exist. The Ottoman Empire fell apart. The British came here, called it the British Mandate for Palestine, with the sole purpose of creating a Jewish state here. That's all. It's very simple. Yes, there were Arabs living here, but it wasn't their country.
Right. And now, do you think...
We're not called Israelis.
Do you think that,
when there was...
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying that the Jews that lived here were not called Israelis. So... But now that they have a country, they're called... The day there will be a country called Palestine, we'll call them Palestinians. But where will that country be? We don't know yet. We know where they want it to be, but that doesn't mean that that's where it's going to be. We're not sure yet.
So if your premise for your point of view is the idea behind the fact that there needs to be a country to then designate people as like a certain to just have a name or nationality for certain people, do you then believe in order to come to a solution there needs to be a two-state solution?
Yes, absolutely. There needs to be a two-state solution, except my solution as for a two-state solution is not the most popular of the solutions. For most people, they just want to take the easy way out. And wherever it is that the Arabs live, be it Ramallah or Jenin or parts of Jerusalem, that's another thing we can get into, is this notion that Jerusalem is divided into east and west, which is really funny. Jerusalem was always a divided capital of Judea, and it's until today the undivided capital of Israel. And to this assumption that Jerusalem is divided into two parts is completely false. So, but we can get into that later. We don't know where Palestine is going to be, and there's a major problem. It's because Gaza is one side, and then you have Judea and Samaria, again, which people call the West Bank, which is only a geographic description, like the East River. Well, I call it by its true name, which is Judea and Samaria. And that area is the area that the Arabs want as their country, to call it Palestine, and take East Jerusalem as their capital. Now, what's really interesting is prior to 1967, both the part of Jerusalem that want and all of Judea and Samaria was not part of Israel. It belonged to the Jordanians, and Gaza belonged to Egypt. Now, why didn't they create a Palestinian country at that time? Now, everybody comes up with all kinds of excuses, but Israel was not involved. There had nothing to do. The lived there then are the people who live there now. The only reason they want to create a Palestinian state in that area is because Israel is controlling it now, and not because that place is important. Now, this is the thing that people need to understand. This is not a conflict about land. This is a conflict about power. We agreed in 1948 to let Jordan Palestine, but this was refused by the Arabs. And then they had to take parts from inside Israel and turn them into Palestine. They refused that too, so they had a war with countries like Egypt and Syria and Lebanon and Jordan, who came and fought with Israel in order to gain control, and they lost the war. And so they had told people who lived here, the Arabs that lived here, leave your homes, and then when the war is over, you can come back once we're finished with all the Jews. Well, that didn't happen. They lost the war. Now, they are not capable of handling that. When they did tell them to leave, and I'm not saying, actually, I'm sure there was some forced evictions. I'm not going to deny that. I'm certain that in certain cities in Israel, Arabs who lived here were evicted by the Israeli army or by different organizations like Irgun and Stern Group. I'm not going to deny it because, first of all, it's there's no point in denying it, and second of all, it's neither the first nor the last country where people have been evicted. Just a year before, in 1947, the same thing happened in Pakistan, where the Sikhs and the Hindus who lived in what is today as the Islamic State of Pakistan were evicted. Mm-hmm. They were told to go and live in the Punjab. Now, I don't hear any Hindus or Sikhs whining 70 years later or 60, 65, 66 years later that they want to go back to their homes and here is their key and they want to bring back their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I don't hear this. I don't hear Native Americans wanting to return to their old grounds where they lived, or the same thing in Australia or in New Zealand. I only hear this here because the people who live here have a problem with the idea of being controlled or being having another entity like the Jewish people living here. And that's the root of the problem that people have to understand. Once you understand why they don't want us here, then it's much easier to understand why it is they do what they do. Why there's such groups like Free Palestine. Free Palestine, the Free Palestine movement, is not about making peace with Israel or getting parts of the land. Free Palestine is, and they say it, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's their mantra. That's what they keep repeating. And what that basically means is from the Jordan River all the way to the Mediterranean and from Lebanon all the way to Eilat, they want all the Jews out and then they want to take over what they consider used to be Palestine. And this is Palestine as in the British Mandate for Palestine or the Ottoman Empire Palestine. And if they're thinking about doing that, they're actually selling themselves short because Jordan used to be part of that state of Palestine that was controlled by the British Mandate and by the Ottoman Empire. Now, because Jordan is just as much Palestine as Israel, there's absolutely no reason why Jordan shouldn't be Palestine. Why pressure Israel into creating a Palestinian state within that tiny little country without cap? When, in fact, it is said that at least about 7% of Jordanians are the so-called Palestinians who were to leave. Some of them went to Lebanon, them went to Syria, some to Jordan. Some people are people who were live there. Why not create the Palestinian state there? They're more numerous than the ones that live here in Judea and Samaria. Now, I'm not saying that they should be transferred, but a country. I don't believe that Jordan is going to last for that much longer. I think that the Hashemite kingdom is going to fall apart, and that would be the perfect time to.
Right, Michelle, do you hear me okay? Michelle?
Actually create, go back to the 1948 idea of creating, which is Jordan Bay. So there's another issue. All the so-called Palestinians, the Arabs that were evicted from here, who live in Lebanon or Syria or Jordan or anywhere else, don't have citizenship in those countries, even though, just think about it, 5 years. So the youngest of those refugees is 65 years old. That's the youngest. Anyone younger than 65 was obviously not born here. They were born either in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, or in any other country where they have been living for the past 65 years. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In this particular case, and this is the only case in the world where second, third, and fourth generation is still considered refugee. No other country in the world, no other people in the world are considered refugees except for the ones who were actually evicted from the country where they were, or the area where they were born. But only in the case of the Arabs who fled from here or who were evicted from here are still considered refugees 3, 4, and 5 generations later. And nobody gave them citizenship. Now, nobody takes this up with Lebanon or Syria or Jordan. They just allow them to be people without a citizenship in the country where they were born. I mean, those children or, anybody younger than 65 was born in those countries, and yet they don't have any citizenship there in those countries, waiting for the day that the Palestinian state will be created so they can finally have a country where they will have citizens. Now, what's that all about? I just don't get it. This is just a tactic to make Israel feel like they're forced to take in all these people who were not born here just because their grandparents, great-grandparents were born here. This is unjust, and it doesn't happen in any other country in the world except for here.
Right. So, what I was going to ask...
Hello?
Yeah. Do you hear me, Michelle? Michelle, do you hear me?
Hello?
I'm there, Michelle. Do you hear me?
Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Do you hear me? Do you not hear me? 1 second. Do you guys hear me? I can't. Michelle, 1 second. Wait 1 second. Hey, Michelle, do you hear me? Michelle, do you hear me? Michelle, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Do you hear me? Michelle, do you hear me? We hear. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Do you hear me? Do you hear me now, Michelle? Michelle, do you hear me?
Okay, well, I guess if you can hear me, I can't hear you, but I guess I can speak, I can continue speaking about this, or I can exit quickly and come back because I can't hear you. I can only hear, let me know if you want me to exit and come back, or should I just continue with what I've been saying?
You can.
Although it's, I feel like I'm just narrating.
I would leave and come.
Okay, I will exit now, and I'm coming right back.
Hey, Michelle, do you hear me now? Hey, Michelle, do you hear me now?
Yes, I just turn up. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
I can hear you.
Do you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay. Yes, I hear you very well.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. So did you hear everything I said?
Yep. Yeah. Did
you hear everything I said?
Yes, heard everything you said for sure.
Okay. So I think I just finished what I was saying.
Right. Could I ask you? Could I ask you two questions that I had?
Sure.
Right. So my two questions were, first, we hear a lot of people come on Vonvo and talk about Jerusalem, and when you think about Jerusalem, uh, you know, any person in the world, I think, would have to be a little naive to say like it's not like a shared religious city of the world. Like it represents a lot of different religions, very much so. And so my question to you would be: is do you think that when it comes to trying to come up with a solution, do you think that Israel might need to back off a little bit on its stance of that being like strictly the capital of Israel? Do you think that it would make sense for Jerusalem to be a shared capital, kind of like of the world, like a shared religious capital for the world? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, my thoughts on that are, let's face facts. Jerusalem was created by the Jewish people, and it's the capital of what was once called Judea. People invaded that country, and that's why you have other religions in there. Prior to invasions, the city is a Jewish capital, and anyone else, if there's any Christianity or Islam in Jerusalem, it's through invasion. So the question is, what what would be the right thing to do? Give the state the capital to the people who created it, and or just when people have invaded it, now they should have the right to have this capital be theirs as well. So this is not a simple question. There are three religions there right now, and there is freedom of religion for all three religions. There are many churches and mosques, and Israel allows free religious rights to all those people. But it would be like if somebody today invaded the Vatican, a different religion, and suddenly, just because it happened 2,000 years ago, it doesn't mean it's not as effective as if it was to happen next week. Somebody invades the Vatican or invades Mecca and says, "Well, this is our religious capital as well." That's basically what's happened here in Jerusalem. So what we're saying is, yes, you can have freedom of religion, but to actually call it your capital when we created that capital for the Jewish people sounds odd to me. I don't see why that should be. You can be a guest and have your churches and your mosques and come and practice your religions freely, but to actually demand this become their capital as well is I don't think that's right personally. And let's not forget that Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock are built exactly where the temple, the Jewish holy temple was built. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is it that Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock were built exactly where this holy Jewish temple was built? Is this some kind of is it some kind of conquest? Is that what it means? It's like a symbol of conquest, and to me, that's what it looks like. So not to come and say that they want this capital for themselves as well is odd, particularly because prior to 1967, if you see some photos of what Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock used to look like, completely unkept. Nobody was going up there to pray, but only in 1967, when Israel took control of Jerusalem again, suddenly this place has become holy. It was never holy before, but when Israel is controlling it, suddenly it's holy. Suddenly it's the third most holy spot in all of mention of Jerusalem in the Quran ever. There's no place in the Quran that mentions Jerusalem. So, and it's mentioned, I think, over 600 times in the Torah. Please take into consideration, I am not a religious person. I am very secular. I'm very much Zionist, but I'm not particularly religious. But what's right is right. And I think that whoever created this capital and called it their capital should be the controlling party. And anybody else is welcome, very welcome, but don't try to take this capital away from the people who created it. That's my take on it.
Right. And what about, the idea that any sort of solution going forward really needs to revolve. I mean, you just hear people come on and talk about history, and it turns into a debate about history. And obviously, if there was, someone here to, speak with you on the Palestinian point of view, they would probably, debate some of the facts that, you're saying you were sharing. My question would be is, do you think that the role of history, if there's any chance of moving forward without this sort of conflict continuing to just linger, do you think that for those people who are third and fourth generations now really aren't, let's say, considered refugees because they weren't born in Israel? I can see where people make that point. Do you think that just the role of history really needs to take a back seat for any sort of solution going forward? Because I just feel like it turns into once you start diving into history, then it's just there's never really any solution. Like that kind of just needs to take a back seat. Do you think that it's realistic for history to take a back seat or no?
Listen, we do have to move forward. Like if I think the first step is to give citizenship to all these people who were born in countries where they now live. That's the first step. I think that should be enforced. Like a Lebanese person who was born in Lebanon, whose grandfather was born in Yaffo or in Haifa, should have citizenship in Lebanon or in Syria or in Jordan. This should go without say. And if one day there's a country called Palestine, then they can just move to Palestine and get citizenship there. But until then, why shouldn't they have equal rights? And why shouldn't they live with dignity and have citizenship like everybody else? They were born there. It's their home. Even if they consider it a temporary home, it's their home nonetheless. I mean, when I moved to Canada, I had citizenship, and I wasn't even born there. So why shouldn't a person who was born there have citizenship? That's the very first step that I think should done immediately. And like I said, I am all for a Palestinian state. I just don't agree with where they want it to be, because there's no country in the world divided by a country in the middle. There's no such thing. That would be like, a good example of that is Canada, where the province of Quebec, the residents of Quebec, the Quebecois, as they call them, have often expressed a desire to create a country called Quebec. And they've done referendums, and they've been trying for this for many, many years. I don't know now because I haven't been following Canadian politics, but I know that when I was living there, very the French Canadians, Quebecois, did a separate country called Quebec. Now, there was a problem there because on one side you have Ontario and all the western provinces, and on the other side there's the eastern provinces like Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Prince Edward Island. So that would like a country separated by a country in the middle. This is exactly the same here. If they want to create a Palestinian state, being Gaza and Judea and Samaria, Israel will be right in the middle. Where has this ever occurred in the world? Where have we ever seen a country divided by another country in the middle? This is a request that simply cannot be done. And then to have them cross over Israel every time he wants to go visit in Gaza or wants to go from Gaza to Judea and Samaria, they have to go through Israel. These are not people that we trust. I mean, we've had many conflicts. We've had terrorist attacks. We've experienced suicide bombers, and we've experienced rockets. And suddenly we're supposed to put all this behind, and everything's going to be fine now. We should just let them cross over from Gaza to Judea and Samaria and vice versa. I say no. I don't. Listen, it's not like we love each other. We don't. We don't get along. We don't agree with each other. We don't think alike. We don't have the same values. We don't have the same desires. We want to move forward. We're very advanced in technology, medicine, science, agriculture, environmental issues. They're still arguing about whether to hang homosexuals or not. And this is not. And there's reports about Gaza abusing their people, the Hamas abusing their own people. I've heard of people getting hanged for selling land to Jews. like Arabs who sell land to Jews, can be hanged or imprisoned. I've seen articles about people getting killed for spying, supposedly Hamas members spying on Fatah, or Fatah spying on Hamas. They're in a constant conflict. How in heaven's name is that going to work out? Two separate governments who most of the time don't agree with each other. One, Hamas, extremely radical. Fatah, little less radical nonetheless. Let's not forget that Mahmoud Abbas was one of the people who helped in the Munich terrorist act against the Israeli Olympians. So we're talking about people here who detest Israel and detest Jews, who talk about a Jewish-free Palestine, where no Jews will be allowed to live there, even though we in Israel have 20% of our population is Arab, most of them Muslims, and some Christians and different sects of Christianity and Baha'i, and they're talking about Jew-free Palestine. So these are the kind of people that we're dealing with. And we cannot have a country separated into two parts with two different governments that disagree with each other most of the time, that have killed each other, and that are in constant conflict on and off. And how is this going to work? We have to look at our own interests and our own safety. We cannot let this go on and have people crossing over from one side to the other. There is no way that that's going to happen. So, like I said, the most logical solution would be to pressure Jordan to create a Palestinian state. I know everybody listens to this, and I'm not the only one who's, believe me, but people listen to this and go, oh, that's really completely outrageous. Why is it outrageous? There are Arabs who call themselves Palestinians who live there, and they're a very large group. So what is so outrageous about it? Why pressure Israel? Why not pressure Jordan? That's where Palestine was supposed to be in the first place. And that was even a concession, because even Jordan was, if you look at the map of the British mandate for Palestine, it actually includes Jordan. But I would be willing to forego all of Jordan and give them their own state. There are mountains and a river separating us, and there's enough distance that we can feel safe. They'll have the Dead Sea, and they'll have the Red Sea. So they have the Dead Sea, which is a very potentially a very lucrative place. That's we use all the minerals and all the good things that exist in the Dead Sea to make all kinds of terrific body products and healing products. And then you have the Dead Sea, where you can have you can have a resort, and also in the Red Sea. And there's absolutely Palestine should be in Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my solution. That's my solution. I'm not saying they shouldn't have a country. I just don't agree with where they want to have a country. Too close to home and completely impractical.
Okay, great. So I believe you need to go shortly, so I don't know if I want to continue just bringing up questions, and I know some people inside the text chat were asking some items. I don't know if you want to come up with some quick responses to them. I know Norman asked, when you're talking about countries divided in between one another, he asked, what about with Scotland and how they're formed? I'm not 100%. I know where Scotland is, but I mean, I don't know exactly how Norman wanted to phrase that question. And Norman's also asked about Sinai and Judenfrei. Excuse me. Yeah. What about Sinai? I don't know. You have to run, correct?
I can stay a little longer. It's okay. Norman, I believe I've spoken to Norman. If I'm not mistaken, Norman is from Australia. Um, he's asked me about this some prior during a conversation, and Sinai belongs to Egypt. Egypt is a solid country. Jordan, I would expect an Arab Spring in Jordan in the next not far distance in the future. And so I'm saying it's a good opportunity if that country falls apart to create a Palestinian state. But Sinai belongs to it belongs to Egypt. So I know I've heard some people mention the idea of having Gaza stretched out into Sinai and create a country for them there. To be honest with you, I'm not of that Woody but and also we have a border with Sinai, and we're having problems with Sinai right now. Stretched out to Sinai, they're already smuggling illegally through the Sinai into Gaza. I think it might be like a militant country and have a lot of problems with that. What I like about Jordan is that there are mountains separating Israel and Jordan, and there's a river. So there's a comfortable distance, which is what's good about Jordan.
Right. Okay.
Jordan is ruled by a descendant of Muhammad. Not at all. Hashemites are not descendants of Muhammad. The Hashemites actually took over illegally. That Jordan is, yes, actually, Batsy spoke about that, where Jordan was given to the Hashemite kingdom by Churchill over a lunch. So that's my answer to that, although I can verify that I'm not aware of that.
Okay, great.
So, sure, I'm sure the king would say that he's a direct descendant of Muhammad, just like I would say I'm a direct descendant of Abraham. I'd like to see proof of that, please. That's my answer to that. Everybody can say whatever they want, just like the Arabs here who tell me that they've been living here for centuries and have been here. I want to see proof of that. How do you know? How does one know how many centuries? Like, I don't even know, like 5 centuries ago where I come from. I haven't even looked to it. So for an entire group of people to tell me that I'm from here for the past 5, 6 centuries or thousands of years, anybody can say things like that. We don't even know where we come from. If we look back to our ancestry, we'd probably all be extremely surprised. Nothing stays the same. So people come from all over. People move from different places. You can't just come up with statements like that without actual proof, because anybody can do that. That's easy. One thing I will say are a lot of the Arabs that live here, their family names indicate very frequently where they come from. A name like Al-Lubnani means the Lebanese. Al-Masri means the Egyptian. Al-Husseini means the Jordanian. Al-Suri means the Syrian. And Al-Saudi means from Saudi Arabia. So, and there are many Arabs who live here who have names like that. But one thing I will tell you, there isn't one who's called Al-Fastini. There's no such last name. So that's an indication as to where these people come from. Even Yasser Arafat's last name he has a very long name, but at the very end of the last name, it's Al-Hussein, which is an indication he comes from, his ancestry is from Jordan and not the region at all. And furthermore, like I said before, he was actually born in Egypt. So basically, he's Egyptian, pretending to be a refugee from so-called Palestine. And this is the leader of this pack. This pack. This is the person who wasn't even born here, who have no ties to this region, is created a whole group of people who suddenly come from here. I'm not saying nobody was born here, of course, but you can read in books like Mark Twain how desolate this area was, how there were hardly any people, and how Jerusalem looked really pathetic, even in the 1800s, before the first Aliyah, before the first Jewish people came to live here.
Right.
How desolate it was, how unkept, how sandy, and there was nothing here. The books will tell you, history books will tell you what was going on here. I don't understand why people question things that are clear, black on white, and it's not the only book. I have written an article called Arabs Became the Palestinians, the Invention of a People. It's actually on my blog, which is www.israelifrontline.com. And if you scroll down on the right-hand side of the sidebar, you will see my articles. And in that article, you can click on several resources. Region looked like prior to the first Jewish Aliyah. And actually, one of the reasons there were Arabs who came here from Syria and from Jordan and from different countries is because Jewish people started farming, and a lot of them came to work here. Now, my grandmother was born here in Hebron, and she used to tell us stories about how they were mistreated for being Jewish and they had to leave. It's no different than any other Arab countries where Jewish people are refugees from different Arab countries who came to live here and other countries. Yes, what else does it say here? Just a statement that Scotland is voting for independence. Great. Ruled by, yes, okay, we covered that. I don't know if he is or isn't. And furthermore, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the country called Jordan today. There is a growing, absolutely, Larry says there is a growing presence of jihad groups in Sinai, such as Al-Qaeda. Absolutely. So it would be very dangerous to let that region be a country. That is good reason not to have a country called Palestine in Sinai, because in no time jihadists like Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda and different groups such as those would come and take over. Actually, they're inside Gaza as well. We have Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda, and not Al-Qaeda, definitely in Gaza, and they've actually moved into Judea and Samaria as well. So we cannot create a country with Islamic terrorist groups. Leave the word Islamic, just terrorist groups. Then it just won't work.
Okay, great. So Michelle, I'm gonna just because I need to move into another room shortly. I just wanted to thank you for coming on to Vonvo. I'm happy that you appreciated being able to just speak to some of the audience's questions and to the ones that I mentioned. And hopefully we'll be able to have you on back soon. And if you can participate with another speaker, which was going to happen anyway today. I don't know exactly what happened to Sana, but we'd love to have you participate in one of those discussions going forward. Okay.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Max, and thank you for creating this. I think it's a great venue, and it's very good. Thank you very much.
You got it. No problem.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.